Today on Rates and Barrels, was Jo Adell's three-homer robbery game the best defensive game ever played? The Pirates are 3-0 in the Konnor Griffin era, and can someone please turn off the injuries? Let's go. Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, April 6th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. On this episode, we look back at a very improbable game on Saturday night. Jo Adell pulled back 3 home runs in a 1-0 win for the Angels, which has led some to say that may have been the best defensive performance ever. And, part of the challenge is that it's hard to actually parse that out on a per-game sort of basis. This seems more like a true open question than many things that actually happen on a baseball field in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with defensive stats early on is actually there's a corollary there with even something like Stuff Plus, which is that you have to have this idea of zero, that is, or, average across in order to compare people to average. And so depending on what plays have happened, how many balls have gone to Pete Crow Armstrong could matter, right? Like how many balls have gone to him, or has he had a relatively quiet first week of play where they've all been easy balls to Pete Crow Armstrong? Then that might change the whole shape of what is an average fielder in the early going. In the same way, Stuff Plus has had some massive revisions in the first couple of days because on the first day, everyone was an ace. And so the average ace might have had their stuff be down, but as soon as the second and third best starters pitched, we got a true sense of what was average across the league. So that's why a place like Fangraphs does not actually track defensive numbers on a one game by one game basis. People that looked at the sort of before and after felt that maybe his Fangraphs WAR went down, but that was due to a revision in the average numbers of fielding. It had nothing to do with Adell's game. It was that just the overall average had shifted, and that changed his Fangraphs WAR. What we can say is a couple things. One thing we can say is his DRS went up by 5 runs. Stephen Kwan last year was the best in DRS, and he had 22, so to have one game with 5 is huge. Another thing we can say is you can look at the before and afters in terms of win probability, and you can say, well, he added 80% of win probability, 83% of win probability with his glove alone. And unfortunately, when you compare that to the bat games, there are some people who've added 150% win probability with their bat. There's some crazy games with the bats. But I think it's fair to say that this is probably within the top 5 defensive games of all time. It's hard to just say definitively that it's number 1. Because you can say, well, this was only 3 robberies. Well, the first 2 robberies were not quite as good as the last one. I'm not trying to say that they weren't good, but they were more of the like, hey, I'm at the wall, I jump up, and it happens to be like right there. In terms of outs above average and in terms of catch probability, they weren't as impressive as the last one. And so you could have some 2 home run robbery games where they were both really, really hard, both more like Adell's third. And so you have to try and compare those things. Lastly, the other thing that was just really interesting about this, other than the fact that Adell has not been that great a defender and he just turned in one of the best defensive games, that happens. Scooter Gennett had a 4 home run game once, like people just do crazy things sometimes. But the last thing that was interesting to me was a discussion of the rules. Yay, super interesting. Let's all
crack
go
open that rule book.
Yeah. But I do think it's a little bit interesting because there were some football people watching this game and saying, is that right? He caught the ball and he landed in the stands and that's an out? In football, that wouldn't be a catch. First of all, I'd like to say, football, please do not lecture us about what is and what is not a catch. I don't think you've got that one figured out.
They do not. Can confirm. Yes, can confirm.
Secondly, the rule book is very clear that as long as one of your feet is over fair territory when you make the catch, it's all good. You made the catch. You were. It's almost like fielding a ball, right? Like that's in the infield or something. Like it depends on body parts, and that's it. So if you are infield, what happens? And then the rule goes on to say that if you land out, the ball is considered dead. And some people say, well, that means it's not a catch. No, it just means the ball's dead. So when he lands out of play, the ball is dead, and the umpires have to decide where everyone's standing. But that's it. You can't throw the ball in from the stands and like get somebody, which I think that's fair. But I did talk some with the family. I'm here in Glendora, fabulous Glendora, California, by the poolside, taking a minute away from the pool to do this pod. And one family member was like, it just doesn't seem like a catch. Like it didn't seem right to me. I know that's the rule, but it just didn't seem right to me.
I had the exact opposite reaction, though. The first time I saw the highlight and it went to review, I was like, that had to be a catch. That was amazing. I know a catch when I see it because this is baseball and not American football.
Yeah.
You're right, though. A couple things. If you somehow didn't see these 3 catches yet, first one, it was a leaping catch at the wall. He took what would have been the first homer of the season from Cal Raleigh away. In the 8th inning, he pulled one back from Josh Naylor, which looked like the exact same catch. If you just saw the end and you didn't see who hit the balls, you may be convinced that was just the same thing looped. It wasn't. And then the one where he fell into the stands was in the 9th inning. That was against J.P. Crawford. That would have been a game-tying homer off of Jordan Romano. So, yeah, like the situation was 2 very high-stakes spots late, and then the extra one just being the first one against Cal Raleigh, just basically giving you one of those things you've never seen before. I mean, the record for most home run robberies in a season is 4. So, like, there's something kind of weird about those as a play. You have to be in the right place at the right time. The circumstances all have to be right for it to even be possible, but then you need to have the unique skill of being able to get up to the wall, time your leap correctly, and actually make the play. And I think because it's a highlight reel play, our brains can put even more value on it sometimes than it really has, but to see 3 in one game is just truly remarkable. As far as Adell's defense goes, in 2024, he was a Gold Glove finalist because they weren't playing him in center field like the same way they did last year. And it was a 6 defensive run save season. He had 5, as you mentioned earlier, in the game on Saturday night. So just an interesting difference, I think, when you put him in a corner versus when you try to play him in center. I think we've described him more as just miscast in center. But for him to be good or even very good in a corner isn't quite as surprising. And I think sometimes we underestimate the difference in difficulty of being a center fielder versus being a corner outfielder.
It's also possible to get better. He talked about all the hard work he's put into it, and we've seen people like Mookie Betts and Marcus Semien basically change their lot in life defensively just with hard work. You've seen it. You can see it in the NBA too. There have been players like Steph Curry who's gotten better defensively just with hard work. So kudos to him, and what a great game. I mean, that's part of the context there too. There's a 1-0 game, So,
yeah.
Pretty amazing too. It is not how WAR works that he should just get 1 win above replacement for that. It's just not how it works.
So that'd be the thing that if someone at the house said, why doesn't he get a win above replacement? He clearly won that game for them. Like, I feel like that's more intuitive that could be a thing than that ball, the last one he caught, doesn't count as a catch.
And the answer is less satisfying. It's because it's just a structure. WAR is just a structure. It's not specific to a game. It's trying to tell you basically how much value would those 3 catches and his work at the plate have been in that game. It's not trying to tell you about that game in particular. I mean, anybody listening probably knows that answer, but it's worth saying.
Yeah, no, it was all really fun, and I'm bummed that I had to see it only in highlights. I decided to go to bed after the 6th inning. Huge mistake. Usually, if you're me and you go to bed after the 6th inning of Mariners Angels, you don't miss something quite like that.
That's right.
So, fun day for Jo Adell, and the starting pitchers were both great. I mean, you said 1-0 win for the Angels. Emerson Hancock, second start of the season from him. Other than a leadoff homer to Zach Neto, he pitched really well. Jack Kochanowicz continues his transformation. even if Jack Kochanowicz is not an ace or even a number 3 starter, going from extremely low strikeout rate guy that we wouldn't want near our rosters to usable fantasy starter is a pretty big transformation in one offseason.
Yeah, I mean, Kochanowicz really did a lot of work this offseason, mostly by raising his arm angle, which I think, did some good for his changeup. So his changeup this year is slightly different. And I think what's interesting is a little bit like Sean Manaea in the other direction. A lot of his pitches stayed similar. So it's just their relationship of his pitches movement to his arm angle has changed. Stuff Plus likes the move. The slider's a little bit more of a 0-0 gyro now. The changeup, is really interesting because it doesn't have that much more drop than his sinker, and it has less fade than his sinker. So I would assume that it's a kick change, actually, just looking at it. I don't know that I can say that I've heard that specifically, but it kind of looks like a kick change, and it's 90 miles an hour this year. So he's got the velo, 96 on the fastball, 90 on the changeup, 88 on the slider, 96 on the four seam. So it is a package that you'd suspect could at least strike out league average batters, given all the velo. And so that's what he's done so far, and that makes him pretty interesting to me. I do have a question for you. I'm going to set this up now because I put it on the rundown late. I don't even know if you saw it yet. But I think there's a really interesting group of players that's, Jansen Junk, Kochanowicz, Randy Vasquez, Hancock, Lance McCullers Jr., Carmen Wadzinski, Mike Soroka, who had another good game, Rhett Lauder, who had a good game, Bryce Elder, who has changed some things, and Steven Matz, that I think these are like the hardest decisions to make when you're trying to make decisions about pitchers in the earlier going, because none of these guys, it could be just, I think the easy answer I'm going to give, the overall easy answer, maybe we'll return to this and pick two later on, but the easy answer for me is that I still think a lot of these guys, as good as they've been so far, are schedule dependent. I'm not sure that any of them rise above the schedule. Maybe if one is close, it's Junk for me, maybe Vasquez. I mean, Vasquez at 96 miles an hour is a guy who's shown he can suppress things in the past, but it is really fun and a little bit nerve-wracking to try and choose between the early sort of rabbits.
It really is. I mean, Bryce Elder, I did not know this, but 8 of his last 9 starts going back to last season have been quality starts. And it's weird to get length like that and results like that when you see an 86 stuff number next to his name, right? I mean, it's good command. It's a 109 location plus. It's a deep arsenal. It's possible that there's some... Yeah, it's just possible that it's sequencing and execution, and it just works for those reasons. But then you see 13 Ks in his first 2 starts. You look at the matchups. It was a home start against the A's, a road start against Arizona on Saturday. And you think, okay, like I don't think he's a strikeout per inning guy, but if he's good command on a good team and he gives you depth, what could that be? Could you get Jameson Taillon type results from Bryce Elder? Is that a reasonable sort of expectation? That becomes more of a league depth question, because there's kind of 2 ways to look at this group. You could say they're almost all the same. I would agree with your larger premise. They're mostly very schedule dependent. I'm trying to decide who the least schedule dependent guy is, because that probably points me to the player I'd be most likely to roster and just stick with for a little while. Maybe it's Steven Matz. I mean, even that I feel like is kind of a lukewarm sort of endorsement. I think it's trusting in the Rays and that they're not going to overexpose them in bad matchups. And it's like, is there any other team on here that from a pitching development standpoint is on that upper end level? It's like, yeah, most of them are actually pretty good. Like for the most part, like the new iteration of Miami makes Jansen Junk a little bit interesting. Plus he's throwing harder, right? I mean, Jansen Junk throws 95 now. Like that's kind of cool. He also has the worst command of the group, so that's the downside in all this.
But he didn't last year, and he doesn't have a reputation for that. He has a real reputation as a strike thrower. So
Right.
that's why I'm like, oh, here's a guy who's up to stuff, and the locations haven't been great so far. But, he has this reputation, and in the past, he's been a real strike thrower. So that's why I gravitate a little bit towards Junk. Matt's has a slightly different changeup. The changes haven't been that much for me, and I feel like we've played this game before. That's why I'm also a little skeptical of McCullers. McCullers has a new cutter, and he hasn't fallen as deeply in love with his sweeper as he has in the past. He's also maybe had the most success out of any of these pitchers.
In the past, yeah. And then I'm looking, he just pitched. We're recording this on Sunday evening. His day is done. That game's still in progress. He went 4 against the A's in West Sacramento. 3 earned, 5 hits, 4 Ks, 3 walks. I mean, that's just, give me a Lance McCullers line. Like, that's what I think of when I think of McCullers. And I think I said on the Friday show with Jason Collette, like, I'm rooting for this guy. He's been through a lot. If he could put together one really nice season, it'd be good for the Astros. It'd be fun to watch. I guess I'm still lukewarm on him overall. I think health concerns also are probably greater for him than anybody on this list other than Michael Soroka, who's had some pretty major devastating injuries of his own. I'm inclined to say that I also do like Soroka a lot.
Yeah.
Because he's shown flashes in a couple of different roles. He's tweaked his arsenal a little bit over time. He's always had good command. He's got enough velo. So I think if I had to pick one guy off this
Totally
group,
new cutter this year.
I think if I had to pick one and just like ride it out, 12-team league, 14-team league, like a league where, pitching's available, but finding someone that you can use all the time is what you're really looking for. I think Soroka's the guy that I like the most out of this bunch.
Yeah, if you're going to make me pick 2, I'm going to pick 3. That's what I do. And I'm going to pick Soroka, Vasquez, and Junk, I think.
He takes the third one. Yeah, that's great. Vasquez had a pretty convincing follow-up start on the road in Boston, right? I mean, the swinging strikes were there again.
Yeah, the swinging strikes were there. The strikeouts weren't. He didn't look as good, but it was a good. I think that's a good offense. And for anybody who's, there was a sell the team chant, and there's some unhappy people in Boston. I still see a really good team. I think they're going to come out of that one.
The team is good. I think they would be better off with a new owner.
Yeah, well, those are 2 thoughts that could also both be true. So, I think Randy Vasquez is, he's also, what I like about taking Vasquez and Junk in my 2/3 is that I'm taking the guys who, at least at home, you feel good about. So you could have this opportunity for 75% starts as opposed to somebody you're more nervous about at home. But you could say that about Soroka and Matz too. Even Hancock. The one problem I have with Hancock, beyond just what he's doing, is that he's a 6th starter that's pitching for somebody else who is injured. So he may, of no fault of his own, lose that spot at some point to Bryce Miller.
Yeah, if he's included in this group, does he crack your 3? Like, how do you really like it? Again, with the caveat that the spot he has right now is temporary, but all it takes is one other injury and he stays in.
Yeah, I mean, he has Houston on Friday at home. That's a good start. That would probably be one of the best starts on here. Junk is at Detroit. That's another good start. How many games are the Angels going to win for Kochanowicz? And Kochanowicz has his next start at Cincinnati. So already I'm like, do I really want to start him in that one? I'm going to start in my AL only. I have no choice. Soroka in Arizona gets at Philly. As much as you love him. See, it's one of those things where if it's start to start, Emerson Hancock is in my circle of trust. I bet you he's one of the 2 best starts on this list going into next week. But if it's somebody I have to pick up and keep for a while, I might hesitate on that one. I might want to try and get somebody like Soroka, who I might have for all year.
Yeah, at Philly for Soroka, then home against the Jays are the next 2 as the schedule comes together. So you're not loving that. And then Bryce Elder, who I mentioned earlier, home against Cleveland. That'd be a stream even if you don't like him that much. And then at Philly, probably a sit for me, even if you're kind of buying into what you've seen.
All those NL Easters going into Philly is not something I really want to circle and do.
Yeah. Rhett Lauder, who did not get much of a mention yet in this segment, at Miami and home against the Giants for his next 2. I mean, is Rhett Lauder good? Is he okay? Is he an interesting young pitcher finding his way? Like how do you assess and describe him relative to the group? Because if you look back at prospect write-ups on Rhett Lauder from 2-3 years ago, and you think about where everybody else in this group is in their respective career expectations for this group, I think you could say he probably had the highest ceiling of anybody in this bunch, other than maybe like beginning of his career McCullers and beginning of his career Soroka. Like there's actually quite a bit of talent there. I just don't know if we've seen it reflected yet in the skills.
Unfortunately, injuries have already taken a bit of a toll on him. In 2024 in AAA and you know, in AAA, he hit 94.8 mile an hour fastball. And that's already down to 93.2. So, you know, and on the sinker, he's 92.5. So just for context, right now, the average righty fastball is 95.2 miles an hour. And no, it has nothing to do with the technology or the release points. But anyway, when I talked to Rhett Lauder, his comp was Brady Singer. And that's interesting for me because I have been long one who's gotten Brady Singer wrong and have underestimated Brady Singer, who is not doing well this year, but for his career has a 4.24 ERA and a 1.31 WHIP. I think Rhett Lauder could do that, which means that in any given year, he could rip off a Brady Singer 3.23 ERA like in 2022 or 3.71 in 2024. But I think for his career, Rhett Lauder's ERA might start with a 4.
Yeah, Park also works against him a little bit too. If he has any trouble with homers, that's going to keep that number on the higher end as well. You mentioned injuries and the impact they had on Rhett Lauder's career so far. It was a bad weekend for injuries. We're going to recap some of those when we come back. Welcome back to Rates and Barrels. Injuries galore this weekend, and some of them are just going to be holding pattern situations for us from a fantasy perspective. I think maybe the worst one of all, at least based on what we know right now, is Cade Horton leaving his start early on Friday. He was diagnosed with a right forearm strain, placed on the IL officially on Sunday. I have not seen a timetable yet. If Cade Horton were to need Tommy John surgery, it would be the second that he's had, so that would be a huge bummer if it turns into something like that. And it's also just disappointing because, you know, as soon as Cade Horton got to Cubs camp, the reports were glowing. Like the velocity was up, the stuff was great, everything was clicking for him, and it seemed like he was truly heading into the kind of breakout year where he was going to build on what he was doing in the second half of last year. Like do it with a combination of skills that made us really believe he was ascending maybe to the top of that rotation, but at least to be something much closer to the expectations for him when he was first drafted by the Cubs a few years ago out of college.
Yeah, he was stepping into himself, but it is really unfortunate. We don't know. The right forearm strains have a variety of outcomes, one of which being sort of a precursor to Tommy John, but then just a forearm strain itself. You know, you can have to have surgery for that. We're kind of just in the moment in between, which sucks because people have to make decisions on Sundays and they have to make decisions on Mondays and they have to make decisions without full information. But I think his talent is special enough that you hold on to him. Similarly, if you have Alejandro Kirk or Mookie Betts, you know, Mookie Betts, you know, the initial timetable that's being thrown around is 4 to 6 weeks for an oblique strain. And obviously he's a talented enough player that you're going to try and hold on to him. And, you know, I think that the Dodgers probably have the depth to handle this kind of an injury. Alejandro Kirk, for a Blue Jays team that's scuffling a little bit, that sucks. It's a thumb fracture. I don't think we've heard yet if it's displaced or not. If it's not displaced, I've heard people talking about 2 months. Non-displaced fractures do not take 2 months. I think it could be 3 to 4 weeks if it's a non-displaced fracture. But if it's displaced, then they have to have surgery, and then you have to kind of recover from the surgery itself. And that's when you can talk about more than a month. But I would assume that Kirk and Betts are gone for sort of 3 to 4 weeks, because even the Dodgers were not sure of the sort of 4 to 6 type time frame. You're real lucky if you got Juan Soto. You know, he pulled up lame with a calf strain, but hopefully he'll just miss, you know, 4 or 5 games or maybe do the 10-day IL.
With the Kirk situation, he's going to see a specialist on Monday. So by the time you hear this episode, there's a very good chance we'll have some kind of updated timetable, maybe some more details on the nature of that thumb fracture. They're going to turn to Tyler Heineman, and I think they called up Brandon Valenzuela to be their backup catcher. So there's a brand new catcher to the redraft pool for those of you in two-catcher AL-only leagues where anyone playing gets picked up. The Cade Horton situation probably puts Colin Ray into the rotation temporarily. Ray was actually the pitcher that came out and worked in long relief on Friday when Horton left that game, so that's at least the short-term Band-Aid solution for the Cubs. And then the Mookie situation, I'm thinking we're going to see, a lot of Miguel Rojas? We're going to see some Alex Freeland? Like, what do you think the playing time,
there was an early
down is there?
Early news that Ha-Seong Kim is up.
Yeah, he's back in the fold.
And I think he's good defensively enough to play short. Maybe they just sort of alternate him and Rojas.
All right, we'll keep a close eye on what the Dodgers are doing. I think the bigger takeaway, too, with the Dodgers, the injuries, everything we've talked about with the way this team's built, if you have any timetable for any type of injury, especially in April, the way that organization is structured, you err on the side of caution, right? If you have a range for a return, you plan on the longer end of the range because you don't need to rush guys back. And I think even at shortstop, they probably trust the mixing and matching enough to try and get this to be something that Mookie's not dealing with in some capacity all year. Like, for them, it's more important to say, you're right, you're finally fully healthy. Let's make sure you're good from the middle of May on or late May on or whatever it turns into. So I think that's sort of like built-in downside with Dodgers, if any exists, is that they can just be more cautious with their players, which ultimately might get you a better outcome anyway. You know, rushing back from an oblique or a back injury could be the kind of thing that just causes you to play well below projection. So maybe this ends up being the best possible plan for Mookie Betts, is just saying, we don't need you back in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. We'll give you 6.
You know, so far these injuries have easily bifurcated into two groups in fantasy, which is the groups where you just have to hold on to the guy through the injury no matter what your team situation is. I do think that Mookie Betts is in that. Obviously Juan Soto's in that. I do think Cade Horton's in that group. And I do think Alejandro Kirk is in that group, unless it's a really, really shallow league. And then you have on the other side, somebody like Sal Frelick who has an oblique strain or just something going on with his oblique and was held out in precaution on Sunday. If that becomes a more of an injury, I think that is one that you might just have to keep moving on from in most leagues, just because it's more replaceable. I don't know, actually, Addison Barger right now is bothering me because I was hoping for more out of him, and then seeing him sit against a righty, was upsetting. I do think he's a pretty special talent, and I would lean towards keeping him. But if you look at projections, they're kind of like for 240, 18 homers with not that much speed. And I don't know what bilateral ankle soreness means. Is that in both ankles? He's just both ankles hurt? That's not good. I take the under on the 4 stolen bases and both ankles hurt. And now you're talking about a 240 hitter with 18 homers. If there is something where he goes on the IL, that might be a really uncomfortable drop in some leagues. That's where the line becomes really fuzzy for me. Is that would be a really tough one for me. And I think mostly my Bargers are in places where he's an easy hold because of the league particulars. But if it was like a 15-team weekly and you needed to keep going, I guess I could see it. Lawler was a little bit closer to the just gotta keep moving, but Barger's, that would hurt me. Would you drop a Barger if he went on the IL on Monday?
If they diagnosed him with something that was going to be clearly longer than the minimum, I might. I mean, the playing time not being there the way we've expected so far might also be the result of a illness that's been going around the Jays clubhouse, apparently. So that, on top of some sore ankles, slowing Addison Barger down soon. When he starts, he hits cleanup. That's the hard part of giving up on him. Right,
and he hits the snot out of the ball. So
one thing I'm glad we were right about, at least from an early assessment, is Kaz Okamoto starting 8 for 8 to begin the season in terms of games played, right? The money they gave him kind of gave us the clue that they intended to play him frequently. So I guess that's part of where the pressure comes from. They like playing Nathan Lucas a little bit. That late trade for Jesus Sanchez, I think, was kind of the extra thing the Jays did that had they not done that, I would feel better about the overall playing time projection for Barger in the short term.
Speaking of preseason calls, I felt Hunter Brown was the safest pitcher when it came to injury. I felt like this isn't a guy who hasn't been injured like ever. He's been such a solid pitcher, just a rock, and now he's on the IL with a shoulder strain. And they're trying to say, like, oh, he just felt something. We don't think it's a big deal, but we do have to remember this is Houston Astros. So he could have a non-working shoulder at this point.
Well, yeah, it could. I mean, we've had reasons to be skeptical of what they say on the injury front now for a few years. He pitched really well last time out against the Red Sox. 6 innings of 1-run ball, 8 Ks, only threw 78 pitches. So maybe that was the little yellow flag that something didn't feel quite right, since he threw 102 in his first start of the season against the Angels. But kind of a wait-and-see situation. Is there anyone you like that's going to get an opportunity to make starts in this absence for Brown, which may only be 2 or 3 turns, depending on how they handle having an off day coming up this week? I know they've got a road trip in Colorado, so that's not going to make you feel any better about Christian Javier if you're in my shoes and thought it was a good idea. Eno avoided that pretty successfully, and so kudos to you.
I do have you convinced me into a couple shares actually in draft and mold.
Great. Glad I had influence on you in such a positive way.
Well, if there is a name, I'd be watching Spencer Arrighetti. I can't say pick him up before you hear anything though, because that might just be a wasted move.
So his first 2 starts at AAA this year, 4 scoreless against Round Rock, and then 4 1/3 scoreless with 9 Ks against Jacksonville.
This is Alexander.
On April 3rd. No, this was Arrighetti. So his last start came on Friday. So he wouldn't be ready to go again until Wednesday at the earliest?
That's it. So what I would assume is he doesn't make the start on Wednesday, and he comes up and he makes the start on Sunday instead of Jason Alexander at Seattle. But if you have to make a pickup right like on Sunday or Monday, assuming that Arrighetti is going to get that start on Sunday against Seattle, that'll take some stones, I think. I know it's not something I would do right now. So I think I just sort of stay away from the situation in weekly leagues and wait to see if Arrighetti comes up for that Seattle start. That would be a pretty good spot start. Arrighetti at Seattle, I think I'd start him there, as good as Seattle should be as an offense eventually.
Hey, by the way, do you feel a lot better about your overall calls around Tatsuya Imai after the second start against the A's than you did after the first one against the Angels? I mean, 9 Ks over 5 2/3 scoreless. He walked 3, but he got the win. Everything looked like it was moving really well. The reverse slider, as some have called it, it's a weird pitch. You could tell it's making hitters uncomfortable, but I heard the Astros broadcast suggest that he's really got 3 different shapes that he has with that slider. Is it possible that Imai actually has 3 different sliders?
Yeah, because there's definitely a cluster at sort of 0-0, which is, it's supposed to be a gyro slider, which is why it sometimes catches. Because gyro means sort of bullet spin and spin that doesn't have, it's 0 spin efficiency would be the perfect gyro slider, right? But when you're around 0 spin efficiency, sometimes it can just catch and go, And so he has one around 0. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical that he can command each of these. And he's like, oh, I'm going to throw the really sideways reverse slider. I think that he just throws basically a gyro slider and sometimes it catches and goes. Because you do see more of a cluster that looks a lot more like a 2-seamer might, except that it's definitely not a 2-seamer because it has less sideways movement than his 4-seamer, right? So if it's anything, it could be a 1-seamer. These are not thrown by many pitchers, but somebody like Joe Musgrove used to throw a 1-seamer. And 1-seamers have the drop of a sinker, but don't have the sideways movement, don't have the fade. So if you wanted to play semantics, you could say, is this really a 1-seamer? But then you have to go back to the velo, and it's 87. So if it was a 1-seam fastball, he throws his 4-seam 94.7, you'd think a 1-seam fastball would be around 93, 94, So I don't think there's a better name for it. There have been people like, should we call this something else? It's not a screwball. Yeah, like watch Devin Williams, you want to see a screwball. Like you turn the ball over, it has a lot of drop. It's a totally different thing. He's releasing it just like a slider, and it's just catching. It's just catching and going a little bit. I think it's going to work. I think it's going to work. And I think that Splitter will come online a little bit more, and I think he'll be a good pitcher. I think Stuff doesn't really know what to deal with it, how to deal with it, because it is such a unique pitch. When it doesn't have comps, it's looking around at Dory Moretta, the other guy who's throwing one of these, and saying, well, Dory Moretta's slider didn't do that well, so this one's not going to do well. But just from watching it, I got good vibes from it. I'm not doing a victory lap on this one. And for your Christian Javier, I present to you Chandler Simpson, who is making all the plays defensively and has made a 20% catch probability play. He's hitting .414, making tons of contact and stealing bases. The defensive part is the part that will make me the most wrong, because if he does have defense, everything changes. Then he doesn't have to hit for power, right? Then he can just have contact, and even a slightly lower OBP works if he's a plus defender. I don't know if it really works that great if he's a plus left field defender. I don't know. Like, there's not that many players like this where you're like, oh, contact 320 OBP plus left field defender. But anyway, it works. It works good enough if he's a good defender. And the early returns are that I get a big on Chandler Simpson.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing about analyzing position players is knowing if you're not able to watch them regularly, or especially watch them pregame and see what kinds of work they're putting in, to know how likely it is that they're going to make massive defensive improvements quickly. And maybe that's where we're at with Simpson. Maybe he's just played well to start the year. I think there's a broader question here too. Like, do you think defense can actually slump? Because Matt Chapman is making a bunch of errors in the last week. He's made 3, I think, in a week. And the Giants' defense as a whole is being criticized. Like, I get it. Like, it looks bad right now, but like, I don't think it's necessarily a team of entirely bad defenders. And at the very least, it sure seems like Matt Chapman is in a defensive slump this past week.
I've watched a lot of those. It's in my household, it's either the Giants or Padres are mostly on. And I would have to say that a good portion of those errors should have gone to Casey Schmidt. In fact, there are 3 errors in my head right now that I can remember that went to Matt Chapman that should have gone to Casey Schmidt. And that's why fielding percentage is not a very good stat. That's why errors aren't a very good stat. They're super subjective. And I think the pain point for the Giants in particular is that Luis Arias is playing out of position at second. Casey Schmidt is playing out of position at first. And that's who Chapman is throwing to. There famously was a clip of Chapman saying to Casey Schmidt, "Catch the effing ball." They got him saying that very clearly. He didn't have to be a John Boy lip reader to get that one. So there's, I think, a little bit of tension defensively where you have on the Giants 2 or 3 standout defenders. I think I talked about this a little bit. I think Chapman, Bader, and Bailey are standout defenders. And then you have around them a group of poor defenders. Lee's okay. Schmidt's usually okay, but he hasn't played a lot of first. And then Ramos is bad, and Arias is bad, and Devers is, we don't know quite yet, and Eldridge is bad. And so it's a little bit of island misfit toys defensively, I think, is the problem.
Yeah, I think you could see that. I mean, I think the right side being flipped is just unnecessarily silly. They can change that with one conversation.
They told him he would be a second baseman when he came there, so apparently that's why he chose them.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but also when you start losing ground quickly in April and your team's defense is part of the reason why, I think you sit down and have a grown-up conversation and say, hey, look, we tried this. It's better for the team if we try this. Sorry, we talked about it this way previously, but we're going to do this. And that's it. And if he's going to pout about it or something, then, maybe you deal with the consequences of that later. But let's give Luis Arraez the benefit of the doubt that if it were a serious conversation with Buster Posey, he'd probably be okay and would find a way to manage it. And by the way, the other piece of the defense out there every day, Willy Adames was a -2 last year in defensive runs saved. I think he was a +5 in OAA.
I think he's on the bad side of the ledger. I think it's just something that when you get a 28, 29, 30-year-old shortstop that they, most of them leave the position around them.
Yeah. It was a question that when they signed him, like how long would he play well at short, and then would he have to move to a different spot for the back half of the deal? That's still a very fair question.
I wonder
to
if
ask.
they'd be better with Schmidt at short and Adames at second, Arraez at first. Ooh. Arraez is also a little bit short for a first baseman, so just put Arraez at DH. Devers at first. Tony V, you listening?
He's not.
He's not listening. He doesn't care.
He also doesn't think.
He probably doesn't need to do, like, in the first 2 weeks of his tenure, be like, I'm moving Adames to second base.
I mean, again, if the front office is where that we'll play you at second base came from, then the front office would have to be where we can't play you at second base.
Take the brunt. Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe it was a group thing. I have no idea exactly. It's something we'll have to dig into a bit more. We're going to hit a quick break. When we come back, we're going to check a few more of our priors now that we're getting second looks at some guys. We're also going to talk about context and how important that is in early season matchups. Welcome back to Rates and Barrels. I was thinking about this, watching Mick Abel struggling through an outing on Saturday. It looked like flurries or freezing rain, very unpleasant conditions for Rays Twins. And he had some problems. He was hit Richie Palacios with an 0-2 pitch. Just didn't have good command overall. And I just thought, okay, like it's cold, it's windy, it's almost snowing. Like maybe this isn't really the best overall snapshot of a player's command on any given day. And it's funny to say that in the face of Steven Matz kind of dealing on the other side. But how much does context matter to you like that when we're talking about small samples? I mean, I know in the Discord there was some chatter again about Yuri Perez struggling against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. A lot of walks. I think he was an early homer to Judge. Like just kind of building on some of the struggles we saw with his home numbers being great last year and his road numbers being unusable if you knew they were going to be that bad. Like those kinds of things are important to be mindful of, but I had more of a, what did you think was going to happen? Like the Yankees scored more runs than anybody last year, and Yankee Stadium's a tough place to pitch. And even if you're using him, your expectations are markedly lower for a matchup like that.
Yeah, I'm not too worried. I mean, there was a Stuff Plus split. Stuff loves domes, and it loves domes on the sea level is the most, because that's just the place that's easiest to replicate your pitches. And so he had a 119 Stuff Plus at home. Yuri Perez did, and it was 112 away. So his stuff was down a little bit away. We saw the home run right away. I still, my preseason call was that he would iron this out, and I still think he can, because one of the biggest pieces of noise early on are home runs. He goes into New York, he gives up 3 home runs, and that might be the last 3 home runs he gives up on the road for a month. It might be. Like, it's really as simple as that. It's a really good offense in a park that gives up homers all the time. So I'm not super worried about Yuri Perez. I'm going to give Abel a little bit of a pass for that cold wind fruity condition. Sometimes you'll see velocity down in colder environments with certain pitchers. There is a temperature component to velocity. It peaks in August. Velocity does. We were actually looking at if there was a temperature concern for bat speed. This was a big thing. Tango was was doing some research, and we went back and forth, and we found that there might be a bat speed temperature component. However, the effect is tiny. It's like 0.1 miles per hour of bat speed for every 15 degrees of temperature or something. So it's not something that we need to worry about. But still, if you see Seattle hitters down early in the going, they have that weird batter's eye. it could be they're veteran hitters, and it could still just be one series where they didn't get enough A swings off. So I'm not worried about the longer track record, for example, the less I'm worried about it. And then even with smaller sample guys like, Jake Irvin, like there's a lot going on right there, and then getting hit by the Dodgers really hard. I don't think you should have started him in that one, frankly. And I think he's sort of in that group of, watch the schedule. So that's one. There's another type of context that you can think about, which is that first Paul Skeens start. Why does he have a 9 ERA? Well, that first Paul Skeens start was the one where O'Neal Cruz, dropped 2 balls in the sun and just really helped that thing fall apart. And, there have been a couple of prominent NFC players that have claimed publicly that, Paul Skeens wasn't in their top 5. But I have noticed that there's a little level of cynicism going on with some of these accounts where sometimes I wonder if they're, practicing disinformation and just joking. Like, I honestly don't know some of them if they're being serious or not. And they usually have joke handles, and it's all some sort of to some extent like an inside joke that I don't know how you can look at Paul Skeens and come up with he's the 7th best pitcher. There was no projection system that said that. Even if you think the defense behind him, it would be bad in the outfield, it was pretty bad last year. I mean, I don't know where you come up with this. I know that his stuff is down a little bit, and people said his shapes weren't good. But at this point, Paul Skeens is like an 8-pitch pitcher with command, and he still throws 97. So I have no answer for you for why Skeens was there. And I would say that Skeens has a 9 ERA right now because of context. So sometimes it's worth digging into the context around how things happened.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. I don't know if that was anything remotely serious as far as the Skeens not being consistently a top 3 pitcher for anybody playing at a high level. I just don't know how you'd truly argue yourself out of something like that, especially in the absence of projections that would even suggest caution. There was nothing in there. There's nothing there numbers-wise to actually be concerned about. Some other stuff I noticed, Andy Pages seems to be past that bad October. I mean, the thing I said back at First Pitch Arizona was, in a world where he was just hurt and not playing in October, he would have been treated very differently throughout draft season, so that created a bit of an opportunity. And so far, Andy Pages looks like he's absolutely back to being his 2025 regular season self.
Yeah, there was something that happened with four-seamers. Last year, Andy Pages had a .556 slugging against four-seamers and looked fine against them and had made an adjustment to, they were trying to get the four-seamer past him up top. And if you look at this chart, you can see in 2025, the postseason, he had a 0 batting average on four-seamers. They saw a lot of four-seamers, and he didn't hit a single one of them into play successfully. And so, and then in the regular season so far, he's got an 800 slugging on four-seamers, and everything is right. And what you see from the swing data is that he's getting on top of the ball better. His attack angle, instead of being upwards, is more flat. It's closer to 0. And that also he's letting the ball travel a little bit, which I think is a good idea for high fastballs. You don't want to necessarily, unless they're in tight, you don't necessarily want to try and pull those guys. Anything that's out over the plate and up is like we just talked about with Jed, is just really hard to pull. So I just see that he's made some adjustment in terms of his approach against the high fastball. Instead of, I think he was pressing in the postseason, and that makes sense. He was like 0 for everything. And so his contact point was drifting further and further out. And I think this is a better version of Pages. So just a thing to just remember that that's the context of Pages, is that October was just October. It was a bad 2 weeks, It wasn't actually something that presaged the end of his career.
No, it's been impressive so far, to say the least. I noticed Jesús Luzardo put up a great line in Colorado over the weekend. And one thing that I've tried to really bring myself around to over the last several years is kind of two factors. One, these Rockies are not your big brother or big sister's Rockies. These are a rebuilding group of Rockies, right? So you can pick your spots against them a little bit more often in Colorado. But I think what's been true for a longer period of time is being able to do that early in the year before the weather gets warm and being able to do it again at the end of the year when things start to cool off in September. But Luzardo really bounced back from a disappointing first start against the Rangers. It was 6 earned over 6 innings that first time out. 6 2/3, 1 earned, 11 Ks, no walks. Just got me wondering, like, for guys going into Coors, like, how good was that start actually?
Yeah, I'm sticking with my overall take on Luzardo that he'll be volatile this year. Not that I would totally stay away, because the ups, it can be really great, like a 11 strikeout, 0 walk performance in Coors. And I was a little surprised when I went and looked. It was the 212th best game ever at Coors. I thought it would be higher than that. But you have to think about it. I did it by game score, and game score is going to give you a lot of credit for those 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. So the top 50 or so were all kind of complete games. And the best, there was a number one, but 9 of the top 15 starts ever in Coors happened in April or September. So I think that, that is the time to attack it. So given that, I think Jeff Francis, who threw a complete game shutout with 2 hits, 8 strikeouts, and no walks in 2006, was probably the best game ever there, because he did it in June. And June and July are when you do not want to throw guys there. Of course, it means you can sneak a cheese past the rat and get a good game. But I think the process here is take some chances early and late, and then the number of pitchers you really want to throw in Coors in June and July probably fit on one hand.
Yeah, I think that's the way I'm going at it this year for sure. I think your assessment of Luzardo is fair. I think he's the type of volatile that still ends up in your lineup more often than not, because the Ks are usually there, for one. That foundation is there. And I think if it's mechanical inconsistency or the problems with like tipping that he's had in the past, you just don't know when that's going to be a bigger issue. He can pitch well against tough opponents in tough spots. He can get blown up by mediocre teams in easy environments, because that's just the day where things aren't clicking for him, right? He has that type of wider range, but it's more of like, leave him in. You're going to get a top 30 or top 40 type starting pitcher by season's end with the chance of getting more. And don't worry about the at Colorados or even like the at Dodgers and different things that pop up on the schedule that would ordinarily give you some pause, right? I think he's good enough to consistently just be in lineups at this point. But I'm a little surprised that game didn't come out higher. You're right. Game score does reward getting deeper into starts. So I guess there were several years where teams were trying to master Coors by just letting their starters continue to plow through, and they got away with it sometimes. One other guy I want to check some priors with for you is Dustin May, because it seemed like Dustin May was doing some interesting things in the spring. I do think context will be important on this one. It didn't go well over the weekend against the Tigers. 7 earned in 3 1/3, only 4 Ks. There was a hit batter. There was a wild pitch, a couple of homers. One was like kind of a curious decision. I felt like Kerry Carpenter took him deep on I thought a pretty well executed changeup. Kind of just dropped down to one knee and flicked it out to the opposite field for a homer. Like, sometimes you just shrug your shoulders and say, all right, strong guys do ridiculous stuff, move on. But then he had Zach McKinstry in an 0-2 situation, and he tried to back foot a sweeper to him, missed his spot, and McKinstry took him out. And that was the kind of mistake where I was like, come on, like what are we doing here? And I guess the bigger question, more so than getting hyper-focused on 2 particular swings against Dustin May, is it's been a rough 2 starts, right? 13 earned over 7 1/3 against the Rays and the Tigers. I would say 2 teams you should generally be okay starting guys against, right? Like, the Tigers will strike out a lot. That's in and of itself enough reason to throw most guys against them. And the Rays are a capable offense, but certainly not one that you fear overall. So what's going wrong with Dustin May now compared to what looked maybe better from him during the spring?
Yeah, I think it's a problem with lefties. And I was hoping that the higher arm angle for Dustin May and the larger arsenal, he brought the curve back. Now he's throwing the 4-seam, the cutter more than he has in the past. And so where he had been kind of sinking into a sinker-sweeper situation last year. Right now, against left-handers, he's throwing 6 pitches. But if you look at this chart that I've thrown up in terms of stuff plus splits, so what his pitches that are better than average against left-handers, he only has 1, and it's the sweeper. The sweeper has a nice stuff plus number next to it, but I would caution against fully trusting that, given that sweepers usually have a platoon split, a big platoon split, and for some reason stuff is saying that his sweeper is better against opposite-handed hitters. I don't trust that. And so you'd say he has 1 pitch that's above average by stuff plus with an asterisk, being that sweepers usually are worse against lefties by righty. And then he has 5 other pitches that are all meh, against lefties. 95 stuff plus against lefties for the sinker, 93 for the curve, 91 for the change, 86 for the four seam, 82 for the cutter. And so that puts a lot of pressure on his locations. Right now his locations are bad, but could his locations get better in the future? Maybe. But will he ever be that good against lefties? I say no. I think that that's the cap on Dustin May, is that he's always going to have a little bit of trouble with lefties, and that's going to keep him from achieving the ceiling that we thought was in there as a rookie and as a young player, and that we thought maybe he could achieve because his velocity's up and he's got more of the same arm angle and mix that he had as a kid. But looking underneath the hood at these splits on a stuff plus, I would say that he doesn't really have a weapon against lefties. And, the fact that he has a 91 stuff plus on the changeup and Kerry Carpenter sees it and takes him yard on it, it's a little bit of an anecdotal piece of evidence that fits in with the model. So I think that Dustin May was still a good idea for the Cardinals, and he could still turn out a good stretch at some point when his locations get better against lefties. Maybe he faces a couple teams that don't have great lefties and he feels more confident and he uses that confidence to improve the locations. So, and I think it could still be a good idea for the Cardinals, because the whole idea here is, get somebody that has a decent amount of upside, doesn't cost too much on a short-term deal, and trade him if he gets into that good level. On the fantasy front, he's definitely in that group that I think now I care about the schedule a lot. And so if he's in that group and I care about the schedule a lot, I'm sure I'll find 2 or 3 guys I like their schedule better, in the coming days. I'm not even looking at Dustin May's schedule. I'm just sort of assuming that. I mean, because on top of that, he's not doing well, and he needs to do something to kind of leap into. Like, you're not going to take Emerson Hancock. You're not going to take Dustin May over Emerson Hancock. I don't think you would do that. So I would just say he's a streamer at this point, and one that I would really want to be careful with. Just to now look at his schedule and put that context back in, St. Louis would throw him most likely against Boston at home. I love that he's at home, but I don't love that it's Boston, so I don't even know if I want to go and start him in that one.
It's borderline for sure. And then the next start would be home against Cleveland. It's like, well, some of the best hitters in that lineup are going to be the guys coming from the left side, the top half of that lineup.
They're going to throw all lefties at him. I mean, Cleveland throws all lefties at you. They are the leaders every year in platoon advantage across the league. So he would be looking at like 8 lefties that day.
It's too bad they can't just tweak the schedule a little bit and have him go on the road against Houston instead. It's such a right-handed lineup that, maybe that's actually a better spot for him. But yeah, I would put Dustin May in that deep league only, schedule-dependent sort of group, and it's going to be a little bit of an effort to turn around those ratios. Going back to last season, 23 home runs allowed for Dustin May. Just about all of them against lefties. 17 to be exact. So that's definitely the split that's going to be the problem for him. So we'll see if he can find an answer there. Did you notice that the Brewers have a new tortoise named Bobby Jr.?
Is it a pocket tortoise?
It's a pocket tortoise. It was presented from Murph to Trisha Whitaker. I think the Friday night game must have been the Apple TV game, the one that got rained out.
Oh my God. What's he going to take out of his pocket next year for the Apple TV game, dude?
I don't know. He's
just
got to
getting
stop
more
one-upping
ludicrous
himself.
every year.
Yeah. So, yeah, the Turtles named after Bobby Witt Jr. because Bobby Witt and Bobby Jr. are friends of Pat Murphy. And, the tortoise they got could be really big, could live a very long time, like 50-plus years, I think I saw. So I'm very curious to see how long that bit continues. But I think that's a new pet that'll be with the Brewers this season.
The rally tortoise? Are they gonna run this really afraid tortoise through everyone that's slapping it on its head?
I hope the tortoise is happy. That's all I'm gonna say.
I saw a clip just real quickly. I saw a clip on socials of this guy who takes his parakeet with him on his travels wherever he goes. And his most recent one, he's going scuba diving. And so he's made like a little enclosure for his parakeet that he could bring the parakeet underwater with him. And it's just like, that parakeet is crapping bricks right now, dude. Like, there's no way that parakeet is like, oh, look at all the lovely fish. It's like, I'm going to die.
Yeah, that seems like a misguided attempt to be very inclusive with your pet. Like maybe doing a little more harm than good. The experience might be scaring the bird a little bit. The last question I had for you today, I need an outside opinion. Is Garrett Mitchell finally healthy?
You know, the bat speed was always there, so he always had that plus raw power. It's good to just see it's back. You know, it's good to see that he's swinging the bat healthily again. And you know, he's whiffing more than he ever has, and that's a little bit something that has some signal in it. But and I wouldn't give him a 318 average. You know, I think that'll come down because he's striking out 39% of the time. You've seen already Muyutaka Murakami's whiff rate and strikeout rate contributing to his batting average coming down. So I do think it'll be more like a 230 batting average for him, but 3 stolen bases and a 76 mile an hour bat speed. I mean, he's feeling froggy. He feels pretty good. He's out there. I think there was some question of like him versus Jordan Walker. Is a toss up in some leagues? I might take Jordan Walker, you know, because I think that he'll make more contact, and I've seen some changes in the tilt and the attack angle for Jordan Walker, which means I think that the bat path has actually changed this time. So I might take Walker over Mitchell, but that doesn't mean that I don't think Mitchell is worth picking up.
Yeah, I think seeing a lower K rate pretty much the entire time we've seen Jordan Walker in the big leagues, but also in the brief sample from 2026, those two things make me think there's a little more floor with Walker. With Mitchell, I mean, I started all but one game so far this year, so I think that's sort of like the answer to the is he healthy question. It's like, yeah, it seems like he actually is. But where do we go from here with that K rate? If we can get it down to like 30%, we can probably live with that.
That reminds me of a good early stat that I didn't put in my piece that I should have. An early stat that matters: plate appearances. It's a real nice, boring number that just tells you they're being trusted, they're not being platooned, they're healthy, they're playing every day. So to have 26 plus whatever he has Sunday, to have nearly 30 plate appearances this early in the season is a good sign.
Yeah, if you're starting all but one game in the first 3 series, things are generally looking good from a playing time perspective for you. So definitely a good sign for Mitchell, given all the injuries he's been through. Last Brewer thing I'll throw out there before we go. So Logan Henderson, because of the doubleheader on Saturday, is now on the same schedule as Brandon Sproat. So if you're in a league where you have to be ahead of a call-up to get someone on your roster that you like as a good pitcher, be mindful of that in case Sproat at some point needs to be replaced by someone from AAA. Because Henderson would be the next guy up anyway, but I just think it lines up even better when it's on the exact same schedule like that.
Yeah, and what sucks is, what's so hard about that one is they're both good pitchers with a lot of upside. And I don't know, if I knew they were both healthy, I think I'm picking Henderson.
I think I'm taking Henderson now, but if you said who's going to be the best pitcher between the two over the next 5 years, I might be inclined to take Sproat in that situation.
Because of the wider mix. And
Yeah. And I just think maybe the Brewers haven't had a lot of time to mess around with him yet. I'm sure they've tweaked him a little, but you look at the Sproat's first 2 outings, man, like the 3 homers against the White Sox, 86 pitches in 3 innings, 4 walks. had 3 more walks in 3 2/3, 4 earned, another homer against the Royals on Saturday. Like, just, I think he's one more kind of gross outing away from going down. Like, I think they could make that switch quickly and make the switch back later, and Sproat could still be good later. Like, that's entirely possible, because that was a pretty close job battle that I was somewhat surprised to see Logan Henderson lose in the first place.
Yeah. Another name that I'm watching closely in the coming days is Anthony Kay. The velo is good, but the mix is weird.
Good weird or bad weird?
Maybe bad weird. The thing that he has that, when you look at I think it's really nice to have stuff sort of broken up into pitch types, because overall you're like 100 stuff plus, that's pretty good for a starter. That's above average for a starter. Maybe I'm in, but then you look at it, you're like, oh, the sinker and the change are really good, but the slider and the fastball are not. And he's a left-hander. And so you're like, oh, so he has the changeup against right-handers. And you look at the mix and how he actually pitches using those. And, against left-handers, he's fastball, sinker, sweeper mostly, fastball, sinker, slider. That's going to work because the sinker is good, but you're not going to get a lot of whiffs if he's big fastball against them. He's 46% fastball against lefties. So he's not going to get a lot of whiffs off of lefties. He's just going to get them to put the ball in play. And then against righties, he's a 5-pitch guy, but the changeup is the only one that really gets whiffs. So you can see why overall it looks pretty good. And the velo, 95.5 from the left side, and a good pitch mix. But when you break it down, you're like, against lefties and righties, he has flaws against both sides. And that's how you end up with a 6% swinging strike rate and a 12.5% K rate. So as much as I like the oopsie projection for Anthony Kay, 3.89 ERA, and the stuff looks okay, I'm wondering if the stuff fits together like a starter's package should in terms of having multiple weapons against lefties and righties.
Yeah, I guess one thing I'm genuinely curious about with the White Sox is how quickly they're going to shift things around with the veterans they have starting right now. Grant Taylor's been used kind of as an opener so far. Is that to keep his innings down in the early part of the season and then to eventually stretch him out? Like, I don't know. I thought Grant Taylor and leverage was going to be the plan.
Do not understand the Grant Taylor situation.
Yeah, that's pretty odd. I think Kay might just eat innings for them all season. Fetty probably doesn't stay in that rotation for long. I think that's a weak spot.
I mean, you're wanting Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz and Tanner McDougal in here at some point.
Yeah, and if they're close to ready by stuff, I think you'd rather just have them solve big league hitters all year than have them stuck at AAA.
That's a good point. They're not going to necessarily come up and be great right away, even if they are going to be great. You'd rather maybe they figure some stuff out. It's a good point.
Keep rooting for the Colson Montgomery and Munetake Murakami homers, though. It's fun. They went back-to-back off a lefty. The Jays brought in Brendan Little to face them. So the Jays got the matchup they wanted, and they homered back-to-back, which was great.
And it's speaking of looking at our priors, I think I might be both wrong and right about Munetake Murakami. So, King of Waffles returns. I am right that he has a 35% strikeout rate and a really high swinging strike rate. But I'm wrong. He has, elite bat speed and elite raw power, as we've already seen from the distances on some of his homers and the barrel rates and the max EVs and all that stuff. So maybe the overall thing was right, though. I said Joey Gallo. Could he hit 220 with 35 homers? Yeah.
Joey Gallo had some good years, and
he did.
It can work for a little while. So yeah, I'd be excited if that's actually what he turns into. I mean, you got to he's not chasing a lot. 29.3% O swing entering play on Sunday. So,
but he's a little too patient overall. It's only a 51% zone swing. So
yeah. Well, maybe looking for his exact pitch a little bit too much. We'll see if that continues. I did see Giancarlo Stanton stole a base this weekend, so got that going for you.
Really
if you get Stanton in your lineup for that. Doesn't matter how fast you get there; it just matters if you make it there or not. And the Bucks, the Pirates pulling kind of a Shoresy. They're never going to lose again. They brought up Konnor Griffin 3-0. They swept the Orioles this weekend.
They're going to make a lot of people look right. My Reds though 6-3, so I think this could be a tight division, man. I know people saying the Cardinals are going to be bad. I don't know if I see that. I see some guys are going to come up, and I think they're going to win 78 games. You know.
I've just never. Maybe 78 ends up being too lofty. Maybe they pare it down a little bit at the deadline, and that's why it doesn't happen. But I think they're going to be a plucky enough last place team to be annoying to everybody else in the division. That has been my built-in assumption this entire time, but didn't take long for Griffin to make an impact for the Pirates, by the way. So just cool to see him up there. Had that double in his first plate appearance. So we'll see what's next for him. We'll be watching very closely. We are going to go. A reminder, you can join our Discord. You can do that with the link in the show description. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed it, drop us a like, leave a rating, or sound off in the comments. We'll see you next time.